My brother called me on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't pick up. I was in the middle of putting the dishes away after dinner, half watching some game highlights on the TV in the kitchen, and when I saw his name light up my phone, I figured it was something small. Maybe he wanted to borrow my truck for the weekend, or maybe he was calling to confirm Thanksgiving plans. We didn't talk every day, not because we weren't close, but because that's just how things had gotten. Life gets in the way. You tell yourself you'll catch up soon, and then soon keeps getting pushed back. But when I answered, the first thing I heard wasn't his voice. It was silence, and then this sound, this low, choked-up sound that I hadn't heard from my brother since we were kids. Since the night our dad had his first heart attack, actually, and we sat in the hospital waiting room at 2 a.m, not knowing if he was going to make it. I said, "What happened?" He couldn't answer right away. I turned off the TV. I set down the dish in my hand. I just stood there in my kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, listening to my brother try to pull himself together from somewhere in Phoenix, Arizona, and I felt something cold settle in the middle of my chest. When he finally talked, it came out fragmented. Pieces. I had to keep asking him to slow down, to back up, to start from the beginning. And the more he told me, the more I understood why he'd had trouble finding the words. Because what he was describing wasn't a single incident. It wasn't one bad night, one fight, one thing that had gone wrong that I could help him fix with a phone call or a weekend visit. What he was describing was 23 years. My brother Nathan Howard, 46 years old, had spent 23 years of his life married to a woman who had, piece by piece, year by year, quietly taken everything from him. Not dramatically, not with screaming or throwing things, just steadily, methodically, the way water wears down rock, until there was almost nothing left of the man I grew up with. Her name was Claudia. Claudia Howard, née Voss. They'd met at a university event in 1999, when Nathan was finishing his MBA at Arizona State, and she was 2 years into a law degree she eventually dropped. She was sharp, confident, the kind of woman who could hold a room just by walking into it. I remember meeting her for the first time at a family barbecue that summer, and thinking my brother had done well for himself. She was charming and funny, and she looked at Nathan like he was something special. I didn't see it then. None of us did. I think that's the part that still gets to me, even now, how invisible it all was at the start. They got married in the spring of 2001. Small ceremony, nice venue outside Scottsdale. I was Nathan's best man. I gave a speech. I genuinely meant every word of it. I thought they were going to be one of those couples who actually made it look easy. For a few years from the outside, everything looked fine. Nathan was doing well at his job. He was in supply chain management, had worked his way up at a logistics firm in Phoenix. Good my salary, good trajectory. Claudia stayed home after their daughter Becca was born in 2003, and then again after their son Tyler came along in 2006. That part seemed normal. Lots of families made that choice. What I didn't know, what Nathan didn't tell anyone, was what was happening behind the front door of that house in Chandler. Hay told me all of it that Tuesday night. Not in order, not cleanly. But I got the full picture by the time we hung up 3 hours later. And I'll be honest with you, I had to sit with it for a few days before I could even think straight about any of it, because I was that angry. The first thing Claudia had done, early in their marriage, was suggest that they consolidate their finances. Made complete sense, Nathan said. They were married. They were building a life together. Combining accounts was the logical move. Nathan had his direct deposit set up through his employer, and Claudia suggested it all go into a joint account she'd set up. He agreed. He was 29 years old. He trusted his wife, and it seemed reasonable. Within 18 months, she had taken her name off the account and added herself as the sole account holder with Nathan as a secondary. He didn't notice right away. The statements still showed both names for a while, and he wasn't paying close attention. By the time he realized what had happened, the account had been rebranded at the bank as hers, and she was managing all the money. His paycheck went in. She controlled what came out. She gave him an allowance. I want you to understand that sense the way I had to sit with it when he told me. A grown man, a man who was going into an office 5 days a week, managing a team of 12 people, earning a six-figure salary, was given an a six-figures wife, $200 a week in cash, for everything. Gas, lunch, anything personal. If he needed more, he asked. She decided whether the reason was good enough. He asked me if I thought that was normal. That's what broke me a little. The fact that he genuinely wasn't sure anymore. But that was just the money. The money was almost the easiest part to describe because it was concrete. The rest of it was harder to pin down. Claudia had opinions about his friends, not aggressive opinions, not ultimatums. Just a steady, quiet commentary over the years. That guy's kind of a dead end, isn't he? I don't really get why you spend time with him. Or, I just think you could do better than those guys, Nathan. Honestly, small remarks consistently applied over years until his circle had shrunk down to almost nothing. His college roommate, Derek, who'd been his closest friend for 15 years, Claudia had found a way to create enough friction that the friendship had faded somewhere around 2009. Nathan had told himself they'd just drifted. It took him until that phone call to say the real word for it. She decided when they went places and when they didn't. She decided when the kids had activities and what those activities were. She ran the family calendar with a kind of efficiency that looked like competence from the outside, and maybe part of it was, but it also meant that Nathan needed to clear every single plan through her first. Fishing trip with a coworker? He'd have to bring it up, have the conversation, wait for her response. And 9 times out of 10, the response was, we actually have something that weekend, or I just really need you here, Nathan, or I just don't think that's a great idea right now. Not a hard no, never a hard no, just enough friction to make him stop asking. The thing about control, Nathan told me, is that it doesn't feel like a cage when you're inside it. It just feels like your life. You adapt. You stop reaching for things you know you're not going to get. You tell yourself you're just being responsible, being a family man, prioritizing the right things. You don't even notice after a while that every priority you have was set by someone else. Here's the moment that I can't shake, the one I keep coming back to. In 2014, Nathan Comish was doing a major reorganization. His direct supervisor was moving into a VP level role and had personally recommended Nathan for the director position he was vacating. It was a significant promotion, a title change, a meaningful salary bump, and honestly, just the kind of recognition that Nathan had been working toward for a long time. He came home and told Claudia about it, and he said he'd never seen her go quiet the way she went quiet that night. She didn't say no right away. She waited 2 days, and then she sat him down and laid out all the reasons the promotion was actually a bad idea. The extra hours, the added stress, the way it would affect family time. She brought up his blood pressure, which had been slightly elevated the year before. She framed the whole thing as concern for him, as love. I just don't want you burning yourself out, Nathan. I just don't think this is worth it for us. She asked him to turn it down, and she kept at it, gently but relentlessly, until he did. He turned down the promotion. He told his supervisor he'd thought it over and didn't feel ready for the added responsibility. The look on that man's face, Nathan said he could still see it, confusion, and then something like pity. And Nathan had driven home thinking he'd made the mature, family-first decision. What he found out 6 years later, from someone at the company, was that Claudia had called his supervisor's assistant during those 2 days. She'd raised questions about Nathan's stress levels, and some personal things he was working through, nothing specific enough to be actionable, but enough to plant a seed of doubt. His supervisor had still wanted to give him the job, but the conversation had made the whole thing more complicated. Nathan eventually found out through a colleague who'd overheard something he wasn't supposed to. So she hadn't just talked him out of it. She'd worked the outside angle too, just in case. By 2024, Nathan's salary was still good, but his career had plateaued years ago. He was in the same kind of mid-level management position he'd been in for a decade. Becca was 21, Tyler was 18, both of them in college. The house was almost paid off, and Nathan had started doing something he'd never done before. He'd started driving to a park near his office during his lunch break and just sitting in his car, not listening to anything, just sitting. He'd been doing that for about 8 months before he called me. I asked him what had finally made him pick up the phone, and he said he'd driven past a travel agency. Those still exist, apparently, and seen a poster for a fishing trip to Montana. And he'd sat in the parking lot outside that travel agency for 20 minutes, trying to talk himself into going inside to just ask about it. Just ask, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't make himself walk through that door because his very first thought, was Claudia's not going to go for this. He drove away. He went back to work. And then he called me. I didn't sleep much that week. I turned it over and over. What I could do, what I should say, how to actually help. Calling Claudia and having it out felt satisfying to think about but useless in practice. Telling Nathan to just get a lawyer and file was the obvious thing, and I said it, but he wasn't ready for that. He said he kept thinking about the kids, about the house, about upending everything, and I understood that, even though part of me wanted to shake him. 23 years of conditioning doesn't come off in a phone call. What I kept coming back to was the money. The money was the lever. It was the thing that kept him the most trapped because it was the most concrete form of control she had. As long as every dollar he earned went into an account she controlled, he had no freedom, no options, no ability to make a single independent decision without her approval. I'm a financial advisor. I've been in this business for 18 years. I run my own practice out of Columbus, and I know how money works and how it can be used as a tool to control people. I'd seen it before with clients going through difficult divorces. What I hadn't seen was my own brother living inside it. I flew out to Phoenix the following weekend. I didn't tell Claudia I was coming. Nathan met me at the airport, and I barely recognized him. Not physically. He looked roughly the same, a little more gray at the temples, a little tired around the eyes. But there was something in the way he carried himself, a kind of smallness. He shook my hand at the arrivals terminal, and I pulled him into a hug instead, and he stood there for a second like he'd forgotten how to do that. We got coffee, and I laid out what I'd been thinking about. The first thing I told him was the bank account. Under Ohio law, and Arizona law is similar, marital income is marital property regardless of whose name is on the account. Nathan had every legal right to open his own account and redirect his direct deposit. His employer couldn't stop him. All it required was filing a simple form with HR and completing a new direct deposit authorization. Claudia would notice, obviously. That was going to create a confrontation. But the confrontation was coming one way or another, and he needed to be standing on solid ground when it happened. He looked at me like I just told him he could breathe underwater. I can just do that, he said. It's that simple? It's that simple, I said. It's your paycheck, Nathan. It was always your paycheck. We spent that weekend doing things Nathan hadn't done in years. We drove out to a sporting goods store, and he spent 45 minutes wandering the fishing section. Just looking, picking things up, putting them down, not because he needed anything but because he could. He used his credit card, which at least was in his name, and I watched him hesitate over a $50 lure like he was making a major financial decision. I didn't say anything, I just let him take his time. Sunday evening, Claudia was home, and I had dinner with them. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because I don't want to make it sound like something it wasn't. It wasn't some kind of dramatic scene. It was dinner, pasta, salad, garlic bread, the TV on in the background. Tyler was home for the weekend. Becca called in from her apartment near campus. It was almost normal. But I watched Claudia operate across that dinner table, and I understood for the first time what Nathan had been living inside. It was small things, the way she redirected conversations, the way she answered questions that had been directed at Nathan, the way she kept pulling the topic back to things she controlled. The house renovation plans, the family vacation she was thinking about maybe doing, the schedule for the following month. Nathan said almost nothing for 45 minutes. When he did say something, she'd let it sit for a moment and then shift the topic. I brought up casually that I'd been thinking about putting together some client resources on financial planning for couples. She looked at me with a polite smile and said that sounded interesting. Nathan looked at his pasta. I didn't confront her. I wasn't there to confront her. I was there to see what I was dealing with and to make sure Nathan knew he had somebody in his corner. The following Monday, Nathan walked into his company's HR office and redirected his direct deposit. He opened a new account at a different bank that afternoon in his name only. He told no one at home. I want to be clear. I'm not recommending deception as a general life strategy, but Nathan wasn't deceiving anyone in any meaningful sense. He was a man in his mid-40s, redirecting his own earned income into his own bank account. The fact that it felt like an act of rebellion tells you everything you need to know about what his marriage had become. Claudia noticed on the 15th of the month, when the account balance didn't increase the way it always had. Nathan told me she came to him with her phone showing the bank app and asked what had happened with the deposit. And he said, and this is the part that I keep coming back to, because I'm so proud of him for this. He said, I moved my direct deposit to a new account. I thought it made sense to have my own account. Just like that, calm, clear, no explanation beyond the factual. She cycled through several responses. First she suggested there must have been an error, then she said she was confused. Then she got quiet in the way he'd described to me, that specific quiet that had always signaled trouble. She asked if he was planning to leave. He said he wasn't planning anything. He just wanted to have his own account. She asked if he was angry about something. He said no. She pushed for 2 days, gently and relentlessly, and he held the line. He didn't explain more than he'd already explained. He didn't apologize. He didn't give her the emotional opening she needed to get traction. He told me later it was the hardest conversation he'd ever had, and also the simplest, because he'd realized, somewhere in the middle of it, that he didn't actually need her permission. He'd just spent 23 years thinking he did. That was the beginning. Over the next several weeks, with my help, Nathan started rebuilding the infrastructure of his own life. He made a list of every financial account, every insurance policy, every investment, most of which he hadn't had clear visibility into in years. Some of it was good news. They had solid retirement savings, equity in the house, a reasonable portfolio. Some of it was complicated. Certain accounts had been set up in ways that would require legal attention to sort through properly. I referred him to a family law attorney in Phoenix, a woman named Linda Reeves who'd been recommended to me by a colleague, and she started walking him through what a separation would look like financially and legally. Nathan hadn't used the word divorce yet, not out loud, but he was learning what it would cost and what it would leave him with, and knowledge is a different thing than helplessness. It changes how you stand. He also called Derek, the college roommate. They hadn't really spoken in 5 years. Nathan told me he'd dialed the number and then almost hung up twice before it connected. And Nathan said something like, "I know it's been a long time, and I think I owe you an explanation." And Derek said something like, "Man, I've been wondering when you'd call." They talked for 2 hours. I won't pretend the next few months were easy because they weren't. Claudia was not oblivious, and she was not passive. When she realized Nathan was genuinely not going to fold on the bank account issue, she shifted tactics. She became warmer, more attentive, not in a way Nathan was fooled by, but in a way that was genuinely difficult to navigate. She suggested couples counseling. She said she wanted to work on things. She cried, twice in ways that Nathan said felt more calculated than genuine, though he acknowledged he might not be the most objective judge. He went to 2 sessions of couples counseling. He kept his own account. He kept his calls with me and with Linda Reeves and with Derek. He stopped asking permission for things that didn't require permission. Here is what happened that I think deserves to be the center of this story, even more than the account, even more than the counseling. About 4 months after that first phone call, Nathan took a week off work and drove himself up to a fishing lodge in northern Arizona, near the border with Utah. He planned the trip himself. He paid for it from his own account. He texted Claudia and the kids the address and told them he'd have his phone if anyone needed him. He did not ask. He told. He was gone for 6 days. He came back with a sunburn on the back of his neck and a photo of a 16-inch trout he'd caught and released on the 3rd morning, and he looked. I saw the picture he sent me. He looked like himself, like the person I remembered from before all of it. There was something back in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Claudia did not handle his absence well. She called him multiple times the first day, first asking when he was coming back, then questioning whether he'd told her about this trip. He had. She'd tried to talk him out of it, then saying she was worried about him, then going quiet. He answered when he felt like it and let the rest go to voicemail. When he got home, she was cold for 3 days, and then she shifted back to warmth. He noticed the cycle in a way he said he never had before. He said it was like being able to see the walls of a room you'd been living in for years. I asked him what he wanted to do. With the marriage, with Claudia, with all of it. He thought about it for a while. He said he wasn't sure he had an answer yet. He said what he knew was that he wasn't going to keep living the way he'd been living, and whether Claudia could actually change, really change, not tactically adjust, was something time would answer. He said Linda Reeves had everything organized. He said Derek was coming to visit in March. He said he'd already booked the Montana trip. I need to tell you about the moment Claudia finally understood that things had changed. Not tactically, she'd understood that immediately, but fundamentally. Nathan had started having dinner with a small group of co-workers every other Thursday. Nothing dramatic, just colleagues who got together at a bar and grill near the office, talked about work and sports and whatever. He'd been invited a dozen times over the years and had always had a reason not to go. Now he went. He told Claudia on Monday when he was going the following Thursday, and when she said she'd like him home for dinner, he said he'd be home later than usual, and she should go ahead without him. She called him at 6:30 on that Thursday. He didn't answer. She texted. He replied with a single message, out with coworkers, home by 9, everything okay. She was awake when he got home. She was sitting in the living room in the dark. He said he sat down across from her and asked if she was all right. She said very quietly that she didn't recognize him anymore. And he said, and this is the thing he told me that I keep thinking about. He said, I know. I'm not sure you ever did. It wasn't cruel. He didn't say it with any heat. It was just an honest sentence said quietly in a dark room, and I think it hit her harder than anything loud ever could have. I don't know where Nathan and Claudia's marriage ends up. As of right now, they are still in the same house, living in what I can only describe as a careful renegotiation. Claudia is in individual therapy. Nathan has told her clearly what he needs: his own finances, his own time, his own decisions, and she has not fought him on it, at least not openly, at least not yet. Whether she is genuinely changing, or whether this is a longer tactical adjustment, I honestly cannot tell you. Neither can Nathan. What I can tell you is that my brother drove himself to Montana in April. He sent me a photo from the river's edge, early morning, fog still on the water, mountains behind him. He looks small against all that landscape, but in a good way. In the way that people look when they're somewhere they chose to be. He texted me, "You should come next time." I texted back that I would. For 23 years, my brother lived inside something that looked like a marriage from the outside but functioned like a closed room. No windows, doors that only opened one way. I don't think Claudia set out to build that room deliberately, at least not entirely. I think it built itself the way a lot of things do. One small decision at a time. Each one easier than the last, until the whole structure was just the shape of their life. What I know is that the room has windows now. Nathan is the one who opened them. And whatever happens next, he's going to walk through this part of his life as himself, not as the version of himself that someone else found useful. That's enough. For right now, that's more than enough.